Now, moving into stock markets, let's have a look now at how things have been going and what we're looking for our predictions for next year. Okay, with stock markets, we've had a crazy year, but you've got to think to yourself to start off, how did some sectors actually survive? When you think about it, we've had airlines that can't get much in the air. We've had hotels that can't get too many people come and stay. We've seen, absolute adaptability, ingenuity to survive. So you've got to take your hat off to the most impacted industries like education, tourism, aviation. These have really, really taken the first line of heavy blunt force from the COVID, and they've managed in Maine to survive. Now, the big businesses have already had the financial power to survive this, but the one that's always worried me is the small businesses. Thankfully, many governments have stepped in to help them, but they are still the ones struggling the most. And they must be looking forward to people starting to be able to commute a bit more. So the quicker that happens, the better off they'll be. I'm generally concerned whether I'll be going and doing traveling and all my favorite places will still be there. My fingers are crossed. I'm hopeful they are, because it hasn't been an easy run. And I mentioned earlier, values have gone crazy. We just seen, even during the midst of this, Airbnb, which I'm a huge fan of user of, it did its public listing during this phase and went on at double what was expected. Now, of all the businesses in the world to list during a COVID pandemic crisis when you can't travel, you would have thought Airbnb would be marked down, but no, it was marked up. And that's the thing. We don't have any logic as to what's happening, but it's happening in huge waves, in huge force, in huge numbers. And somehow it just all keeps going. We still have issues in terms of what's going to recover fast. The airline industry, is it too late or too early to get into that? The hospitality, the accommodation industry. These are really tough questions to ask at this point in time. But I think you'd be brave to get in too quickly because of the fact that we don't know how long the recovery period could be, and we don't know how deep the wounds will be that need healing before they can move into prosperity again. Even with an airline like Qantas, they're losing a couple of $1 billion. How many years of profit before they've patched that hole and recovered to their previous level? Now, it is a lower stock price right now, but are you willing to take the punt? And well, we're still not sure about international travel, etc. So again, you've got to be brave if you want to take those recovery lines, but just always remember, fortune follows the brave. So if you are going to be brave, do your research, check it out, and make sure you make an informed decision because it could be lucrative. Those industry rebuilds of aviation, etc., it's going to take the government to come in, not just with support, but more importantly, with policy, and particularly policy of movement. That's going to be far more important than any level of support package or financial compensation. If they can't get customers back, any amount of support will just be wasteful. So that's going to be the key issue. The government's now got the clock ticking to get movement back into play. And have they got the financial means to do so? I mentioned Qantas earlier. It's lost billions, but it's got billions in reserve. As long as they've got that, they're fine. So managing that cash flow, managing that capital is going to be the skill of the current age. How they do that to get back to profit is the real test. What I've been watching lately in the stock market is a little bit of over manipulation. I keep watching companies that are doing extremely well because even with COVID, some companies are reporting record profits, as you'll see. But I'm watching it, and often companies are reporting profits of terrific amounts, and yet the next day, the price of the share goes down by not a little bit, but sometimes a lot. We've seen that on a regular basis, and that's because I think of too much back-end manipulation. Too much of, we thought they'd do better, even though it was often a record profit. So you've got to be careful about what's going on. There's not enough truth in the market for my liking right now, and not enough regulation because the government is busy looking after what they have to do with COVID. And as a result, I just remind you every single year, particularly at a time like now when I think markets might be a little bit overheated, make sure you feel comfortable with the value of your acquisitions. Whatever you're buying, understand it, research it, make sure you're comfortable with its value. If you do that, there's safety in the thought. Number one, even if you're wrong, you'll be happy because you gave it thought and made the right decision. You didn't just guess. But if you get it right, the profit can flow. Let's have a look at how the stock market went over the last year. And you can see, surprisingly, 12 months, it went over almost 30% in Australia and the US. That's phenomenal. So the green line being the Australian market, the blue line being the US, and the purple line being the FTSE in the UK. Terrific growth. But you can see it is pretty volatile. There are some peaks and troughs there. There's movement, but overall, we've seen, that positive trend moving forward. That's quite surprising given that we're still right in the midst of all this, particularly in the US where you saw those numbers are phenomenally high still with caseload and daily cases. Huge, but somehow it doesn't matter to the stock market. We'll see what goes on. Concerning, but this can't seem to stop at the moment. It's a real bull market.